Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Shay Douglas here from Earth Heroes TV. We are a conscious, evolving media platform. And today I'm really excited because I'm joined with Jason Reynolds from the quantum movement. He's on a massive journey sharing a lot of truth with the world right now. He's releasing videos and he's really cultivating this community and this movement to empower people ultimately. And it's just felt really aligned to open up this conversation. And I'm just really grateful that he's here to join me today. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a background on the purpose of opening these conversations and having these interviews, that I feel the relevance in the time on Earth right now is extremely significant. So much is changing. We're seeing a lot of shifts internally, externally. And although we have information at our fingertips, censorship is on the rise and people are being shut down. And I just wanted to really honor that Jason has some valuable truths to share with the world to empower, inform, and also connect us to deeper levels of the truth of our reality, what makes up the fabric of this existence that we find ourselves in. And some of those truths are not necessarily what we want to hear, but potentially what we must hear in order to work through some of the deeper suffering, pain, and hurt that we may be feeling on an emotional level, particularly with what's going on in the world right now. So Jason, I just wanted to thank you for joining me. Really excited that you're here. And I'm pretty keen just to jump straight into it. I've been following your videos. You just released one this morning all about good intentions. And what you share seems to be like hitting the nail on the head around understanding our existence in the world and what it means to be a human in today's reality. But I'm curious, how did you get to this point? And for those who are new to meeting you, like what was a catalyst moment in your journey? And what was the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome that has been purposeful to get you to where you are now?
Thanks heaps, Shay. For just, well, first of all, I know it takes a lot of courage to actually even create a space like this. It seems easy to get on a video and start talking, but just honor what you've actually created and provide a space to come and share what I'm experiencing. But it's a big question. I suppose it's a common one as far as what that catalyst is and what was the point that things change as it starts to rain here. So hopefully the rain can move away so I don't have to relocate. But to me, I think that's one of the biggest points that keeps us suppressed, that we're looking for one moment. We're looking for some particular point or catalyst that is going to change everything. And ultimately, that becomes our very disempowerment, because we're fed so much information and misinformation about how suddenly everything was an overnight success. And we remember in our own life those highs that we had, and that the first New Year's Eve, the first kiss that we had, and how amazing it was. And we try to recreate that moment again, and we spend so much of our life trying to relive dead moments. And it's those particular moments. What I mean by dead moments is they've been. My invitation is into the present moment. It is into where we're existing right now. So I looked at, I suppose, my life in a lot of ways in my earlier years in how much, I suppose, opposition, how much I tried, how much I forced, how much I wanted to be something or tried to be what I believed I needed to be in following others. Eventually, what it came down to is to realize the difficulty that there is in our own life to actually love ourselves. And when I say love, I don't mean in a romantic way. I mean to bring ourselves to the primary focus of our own attention, to take complete responsibility for all of what we are, and to recognize if we want to be infinite, if we want to be significant, if we want to tap into things beyond our own current experience, it's not a fleeting one. It's a choice. It's a stream that we live in. It's a river that we go down. We can't have, I suppose, what we've been led to believe, like these positive experiences, and ignore the negative. Because what I learned is it's the negative, or what we perceive to be negative, what we perceive to be dark, what we perceive to be, inconvenient, uncomfortable, and denied in our life. That is where our growth is. The issue is, for so many of us, we don't understand just a simple thing of how to navigate the darkness. And ultimately, we cannot grow, we cannot prosper, we cannot expand in our own life, and we cannot even make a choice until we become present to where we are at this particular moment. So for me, there wasn't any one moment. It's about being in a moment. And I think one of the things I've really learned recently is, you know, we all have these moments where we tend to have these moments of celebration that we ultimately then come to the realization we're having them for everyone else, like this amazing breakthrough that we've had that we want to go and tell everyone about. And I'm sure for everyone, they've had, you know, very enlightening, very, you know, significant moments in their life. But ultimately, how quick they give that away, they go to someone else to be validated or advocated. And it's to recognize that it's not us that are determining our fulfillment. It's how other people receive our perspective of our fulfillment. And it's ultimately, that's where our disempowerment is, because we're looking for someone else to go, wow, that was amazing. You're amazing. Only because we're not embracing that ourselves. So, you know, those conversations of, I've got to tell you this thing that happened, it's amazing, and how we met and everything that came together. The real irony and the truth that exists in that, when we start elevating and we start showing other people and determining to other people the great things that happened. I'm going to have to move. Sorry, mate. It's starting to come really heavy. I'll just be 30 seconds getting into clear ground.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you shared there, Jason, particularly around navigating the darkness, because often what I find is it's so easy to avoid looking at, you know, the shadow elements of ourselves. It's would be challenging to fully embrace, you know, those more challenging times. When for me, I know that it's like when something like that comes up, my natural default setting is to, you know, avoid confrontation or don't exacerbate it. When what I'm hearing you say is the importance of honoring where we're at individually, and also potentially that can extrapolate out and look at where we're at collectively, especially in a time of like massive transition, to truly acknowledge the darker elements, as you said, not necessarily negative, but those parts of ourselves that, you know, we don't generally shine a light on, particularly with the denser emotions such as the fear and the shame and the guilt and the outrage that, you know, many of us may be feeling at this time, particularly with what's going on right now. And that's why I feel what you have to share in this space is so relevant for us to understand that there is so much going on outside of ourselves in the external realm, but the relevance of bringing that all back in, journeying deeper within our own hearts, within our own emotions, within our own deeper soul, and how we can reclaim the freedom that we're all yearning for by looking at those deeper triggers within. And whenever you feel ready, I would love to hear you kind of elaborate on that piece around the relevance of finding the freedom within ourselves, and using the external as a catalyst for us to feel that deeper sense that we all have that potential to really unlock, to go down the doorway of, if that's something that we're willing to do. So glad to see you back joining me, brother. Found a nice shady spot there.
Sorry, mate. I've had a bit of water, sort of, you know, like a waterfall come onto the. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's all good now.
Sorry, I've just lost the screen, but here we go. Yeah, it's we've been a lot, and I'm sorry if I don't pick up exactly from where you are, but we've been indoctrinated by words more often than not. Like, you know, when we say we've got to move into our heart, that we've got to, you know, live by our own soul, that we've got to be connected. And there's a whole range of buzzwords that we move into. But what I've learned is that for most of us, when we get down to a moment when we become unguarded and we allow ourselves to be seen, not just by ourselves, but by everyone else, the reality comes out. And the thing to understand, one of the biggest liberations that I want to bring to people is the fact that trauma does not exist. Trauma is a choice. Trauma is an indication when we are not choosing to be in a space where we choose how we want to live our life. Now, it's not to say that people haven't been abused, people haven't been downtrodden, people haven't been the result of sinister, actions and strategies of others, agendas, you might say. But ultimately, what it comes down to is when we are present in a moment, what is exposed to us is an infinite truth that all of the challenges, all of the problems that we had experienced prior to this moment are the building blocks that allow us to be significant in this moment. When we are not present and we are not embracing ourselves in this moment, and we're unable to accept and receive our own attention, we start to focus upon the trauma and the reason why we can't do that. The only focus and the only priority for ourselves in each moment is in the embracing and the alignment and what I would call the true integration of what we are. Now, that requires us to realize that so much of our life, and look, I would say the broken models of science, the broken models of psychology, the broken models of medicine are creating a dependency that causes people to not be independent and embrace themselves. For me, this prescriptive idea and the dependent structure that we've created where we go to experts, because that's what we're being conditioned to do. That when we've got a problem, whether it's a business idea, I don't know if I can get off the ground, whether it's I've got a problem with my partner and I don't know how to deal with this, whether it's something that we've lost our shit in one moment and we feel completely guilty and shameful for what we said, but we didn't mean it and now we're taken and judged in a particular way, whatever it may be, our first port of call is usually to go outside of ourselves to someone else. And that becomes a habit. And in the very habit of that, we're choosing to disempower ourselves because we don't believe that we have the capacity to navigate our way forward. And when we continue to practice that, we will have temporary highs, we'll feel good for a period of time, and then it'll revolve back around. And ultimately, that's what deteriorates our relationship with ourselves. It maintains what I would call a disintegration, a separation. When we are integrated, there are no thoughts, there are no fears, there are no labels for energy. Energy is just energy. When we are disintegrated, we have fear, we have doubt, we have excitement. We have all of these things that manipulate and control us because we are not present. We're present to the result or the outcome. So the irony of all of this is it's so simple. It's not about doing a volume of teachings, reading scriptures, finding prose from ancient times or listening to particular gurus. Ultimately, the end result and the challenge that I find that I have with people is consistently, as they elevate, as they become more aware and more engaged with themselves, is to continue to go into themselves, continue to choose themselves and to understand how they have everything that they seek within them. And it's at that particular time where the distractions and the complications just fade away. We don't try to fix them. We don't try to deal with our trauma. We don't try to work on it because working on our trauma, working on our past, working on our problems, that is just a cycle. That's a hypnotic state that has been indoctrinated within us that we need to fix things. Because if we have to fix things, and the worst thing, if we're successful at fixing things, we then look for the next problem because it's what made us feel good. We go back to that habitual state of not consciously, but unconsciously, we look for another problem. We create another problem. We then engage. And then from that particular point, we then fix that problem and we celebrate it. Now, the issue is most of the time when we celebrate it, we share it with others. And therefore, we don't integrate it within our own self. So it never becomes a truth. It becomes something that allows other people to love us, other people to appreciate us. The challenge for our own self is we should never share anything with anyone until we truly understand it within our own self. Because when we do that, when we become our awareness, when we become the wisdom, when we become our experiences, there is no effort, there is no force. But what occurs is a peace and a presence and a purpose to move forward because we're not and no longer living in opposition to what we are. And ultimately, I've looked at, I suppose many things over the years, and we used to do some, deep elongated practices that I would say were profound. And, did everything in a range of different ways for different people in their life, from high performance to overcoming terminal illness to relationship, everything that was significant to people. But ultimately, the biggest challenge for me was allowing that to be simple and allowing it to be just about simple processes and practices that we already do, not introducing breakthrough ideas, not introducing a latest fad, not introducing another modality, but getting down to the core of what works all of the time. And for me, as I was going to mention before, is for us to recognize true alignment in our life, and this is a big flip for many people to experience, is that we stop projecting and talking about all the great things in our life, because if they're integrated, they come through us. We're radiant, we're glowing, we're engaged and enlivened by that. We don't need to prove that to anyone else, because that's what we are. When we are most aligned is when we become present and aware of the things that are not supporting us, that we're not aware of. Because if we're celebrating, let's just put it this way, if we're celebrating that alignment, it's because it's rare. It's because we're so used to being in this disintegrated, disconnected state. But it's normal and it's relative to us. So then when we have something good happen, we go, wow, this is amazing, and it's an interruption. When we are in a connected and integrated state, what we start to realize are the problems that we perceive or the challenges that are coming up. And they are coming up in an advocation and a confirmation that this thing doesn't support me, that I'm now able to move through it. And it's those things that become rare in our life because we observe them and allow ourselves to move through them. So it's about, recognizing and celebrating when something comes up that we identify that is not supporting us, that is not elevating us. But that comes down to an individual understanding how to move through that. And once we understand how to move through that, the irony of what happens in people's lives is they don't have those traumas anymore because they understand how to move through it. I had an experience about a year ago with, with all of the circus that's going on in the world at the moment that we've all created. For some of us, we're giving power to some group of people to say that they've enforced it upon us. But until we realize we created it, we're still going to be subjected to it, and we're going to go around in a merry-go-round hoping that things will change or a savior will arrive. But I was speaking to a person who one thing led to another. It was a political thing I was going down for, and it was in Canberra, and I got told, there's heavy mandates, and they won't let you off the plane and without a mask and all the rest of it. And I choose not to wear anything along those lines, and that's my choice. Ultimately, because I take responsibility for myself. So the thing is, I was given a form to say that I don't have to wear a mask. Now, when I went to the airport, 2 people sitting next to me were sitting there without a mask. They got hassled by the police. They got hassled by the airport workers as to why they weren't, and they have to, and they should. I was sitting 1 seat away from them. They looked at me, didn't say a thing. I walked to another part of the airport, went through, and the people in front of me with the bags had a couple of people in front. They got, questioned and everything else. I didn't. I had this particular day. I was hoping someone asked me. I was hoping someone came forward and said, because I wanted just to understand, and I love the human behavior aspect of it. A lady, when we were checking in, went up to the counter and pointed to me, in amongst the crowd, and started saying, that guy over there. And because I was willing and wanting to experience that, it never came to me. Because I was ready to receive the difficulty and the challenge, I never had it there. But when we sit in fear and worry and wonder, we're projecting and receiving that, and we create that all the time. So, I understand that when we embody something and we allow ourselves the time and space to understand it within ourselves as it relates to us, there is nothing to fear. And it's to realize that fear, like trauma, is one of our greatest wisdoms if we understand what it is, but it's those moments where we become most present with ourselves. In fear, we are so present to the power of what we are. We just are so fearful that making a mistake, we don't want to get it wrong, but we are engaging all of what we are in that moment. Same with trauma. Trauma is reminding us of moments where we were engaged and present in that moment. And then we can see whether it's a negative impact that it's having on us now. What we are seeing is how much, when we are in a state of presence, how much it creates in my life, and whether that may be a destructive thing at this moment, it's not whether it's good or bad, it's to realize that when I'm present, how much I shape and I create my life. And if I can use that in a way that moves me forward, I then can understand the laws of existence rather than hoping or wishing that it would be different.
Beautifully said, Jason. I love the way that you kind of articulate the experience of what we're going through as human beings and what's coming up. And for me, what I'm hearing from you is that naturally our default level of embodiment is that we are whole, we are complete, we are essentially divinely created with potential to create magic. Yet it's the attachment to those kind of darker elements of disintegration that limit us and hold us back. And a key piece that I would love for you to elaborate on, particularly with your experience, and I love the piece that you shared around not introducing anything new to practice, but I'm curious for those who are looking for, a reintegration practice or the tools to be able to, if anyone's listening to this right now and they're really resonating with what you're sharing and they find truth in these words that you're speaking, the key element, as you mentioned, was the words and how they're governing our consciousness. And I just wanted to invite anyone who's tuning in right now, if you had any questions, just write them in the chat section there. Just leave us a comment. Let us even know where you're tuning in from while we have Jason with us, and we could get him to really elaborate on that. But the key piece is the practices that are essential for everyone. And I understand they might be different for different people, but based on your experience, what do you feel would be relevant for most people to really dive into and commit to reintegrate back into themselves, particularly with what's happening right now? And is that even essential? Or how do we just do what we naturally do on a daily basis, but amplify that to a new level that allows us to be at that default level of connected wholeness that we were born into this life to be?
Well, one of the, I'll go into the practice in just a moment, but just to preface that is, it's to realize that when we're most confronted by ourselves is when we choose to move forward. Our ego, or what people would like to consider the concept of the ego, which is a man-made thought-based creation, it doesn't exist. It is something that we rely upon and we choose to create in order to support ourselves in our own choices to deny what we are, because we don't understand what we are. We've been told, and we don't accept things that are not true, so that it becomes this, challenge. So, for example, our ego or our limitations or those things that oppose us will always appear when we have like this amazing idea that explodes within us and we go, okay, I'm going to move forward. We can't change this, and we won't change it. It's a matter of being prepared and understanding it. That when we go to move forward, our ego will become most present. When we choose to change the way that we're living, the choose to elevate the experience we're having, is about letting go of what has been previously. And look, it doesn't matter whether we love something or we don't love it. Whenever we let it go, there's a romantic part of, I actually like that thing. Even if it was something that I can't wait to let go of, we start to see the beauty of it as we release it. We start to appreciate it for what it was. And things that we value as well, we start to see that. So what becomes important to realize is that if we are intending to grow, the things that come into our life as we go to grow are the things that are not supporting us. And they come to us to say, do you want this to be part of your life anymore? And that reinstigates an inevitable truth within us, our choices, what we choose to create. Those things that we've held on to, those things that we've invited in, those things that we've maintained in our life previously, do we still want to hold on to them? Now, one of the biggest challenges in life is the concept of making a decision. Because a decision is not about moving forward. A decision opens up a space so we can have choices to move forward. A decision is about a process of letting go. The word decision is to cut away. And that the very wording of that is, in our own life, what's challenging for most of us is that when we want to move forward, we realize the challenge that comes in leadership, in being an example to others, is that we, in order to find, prosperity, in order to find our own truth, we have to let go. So it's important to realize that no matter what you do, when you start to move forward, what is going to come and what will be inevitable are the things that don't support you, and it's now asking for you to how you can release them. Most of us do that releasing in a very, aggressive, angry, frustrated, and sometimes a screaming and shouting type of way. For some of us, we do that in anger and screaming and shouting to people that we love, because it's the only way that we know to release and let go. This build-up. The important thing is that when we understand that no matter what happens when we move forward, we're going to be confronted by that chaos. Now, once we understand the how to move through chaos, we can start doing that gracefully. When we do that gracefully, we start to receive things gracefully, because in the same way that we release something will be the same way that we receive something. It's on a parity. We can't release something in anger and frustration and then suddenly go into this grace of receiving. What instigates a great level of receiving in people's lives, which we can learn and start to create from a very powerful place, is learning the grace of letting go. So there's many practices that, I suppose I've been exposed to, from, deep energetic practices, from meditations to ancient philosophy, and a whole range of things that I explored or was exposed to, and things that are profound. From remote healing, all of these things that I suppose are outside of our common teaching. But one of the things that I know to be absolute, and until people actually are able to do this, nothing will change or sustain in the longer term, no matter how hard we work. The first thing that we must learn is how to release, how to let go. Because the very nature of our own existence as well is that energy exists and it moves to us and through us. Everything that holds us back is what is stuck within us, what we hold onto. And we only hold onto something because we don't understand it. We don't know how to recreate it. We don't realize that it's already a part of our experience. So we possess it, and ultimately it possesses us. So the practice of releasing has no peer. And for me, after being exposed to a lot of things over the years, to come to that simple awareness, my focus is to teach and share things that not work occasionally, but always work. That puts you in a particular position that it's always going to support and sustain you every time you invest in it. And the irony, Shay, is that when people realize that, it's not the fact that, wow, I've understood it. The biggest confrontation for people is there's no more drama. There's no more excuse. There's no more resistance, because I actually understand how to move through this. And that's what confronts people more than the trauma itself. It's the resistance to move into their own significance. So the thing is, with releasing, you don't need to fix things. You don't need to you're just facilitating, creating an environment to allow things to be as they are, to stop interrupting. And this is where the mind and the thoughts and all that come. Like the mind itself, just the word, it goes again into that whole thing of holding on to mind something. These words are not by mistake. Our ability to be free is determined in the value of what we let go, because we would only let go of it in the understanding that we can recreate it. Not just as a theory, but as a reality. So we have a whole range of practices that we share with people. There's simple things that, we get a lot of our community to practice such things as get a pen and paper, spend 15 minutes a day just writing into your own brilliance. What is it about you that is brilliant? What is it about you that's significant? People don't do that. And you wonder why we continually focus on the things that are problems, that are not working. Consider the conversations, to imagine me coming and meeting you and saying, Shay, what I'm amazing at. Like, you've got to see how good I am at doing this. And I'm probably the best in the world at doing that. People start going, oh, who's this guy think he is? But why is it that we don't elevate people for starting to explore that? So what I would say in writing into your own brilliance is such a powerful practice, because first of all, it's not just writing and going, wow, I had this amazing insight. It's to first realize how difficult it is to do that. Where do I start? Am I doing it right? What am I supposed to be getting out of this? This is the adventure of life. These are the unexplored worlds that you can step into. And the consideration comes after a number of days of having the discipline to follow through and do it, to go far out. What is within, like all of this stuff that is here? And then eventually we move into something where we start to consider how many opportunities are available to us, that we get into the divine reality that the highest expression of energy is organization, that things are allowed to be where they are most prevalent to grow and to expand and to integrate with everything else. And that becomes something within each of us.
Beautifully said there, Jason. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing, man. I really like that practice. That sounds like a really good takeaway for everyone who's watching right now to just integrate into their daily lives in the morning or afternoon. And often, you know, I find myself writing a lot of lists and things to do, but not necessarily things to be and what I am. So I love that so much. I just had a great question come through, and I'd love your perspective on it, from someone on Facebook. They've just said, when someone says they are a recovering alcoholic and been sober for 10 years, are they holding on to a problem? It's a great question. Absolutely. And I'd love your take on that one, Jason.
Absolutely. For sure. I mean, it's how they're defining themselves. It's, you know, there's those concepts of, we were speaking about this the other day with a group of people, that, you know, there's this idea in consciousness and spirituality that you've got to be serious, you've got to get deep. And, you know, going out and partying and getting loose and all the rest of it is indulgent and it's of the dark side, and you shouldn't be doing that. You've got to be whole, complete and pure. That is to me one of the greatest lies and the greatest challenges and burdens that are put upon people that want to find a deeper reality in their own truth. It's to realize that there's nothing wrong with alcohol, there's nothing wrong with drugs, there's nothing wrong with any particular thing that exists in this particular space, except for the relationship we have with it. So if we are continuing to maintain a relationship that I'm a recovering alcoholic, that hasn't been released or let go, and it still defines that particular person. And the interesting thing is that in a 5-minute practice, something that we're actually sharing coming in the next couple of weeks, that a 5-minute practice each day, 10 years, and this is, look, I suppose just to go back, this is what really, when you asked me about the catalyst before, this is what got me into this space. I remember we used to do a lot of things in consulting and in different areas, but I remember sitting with an individual that we took through a very basic practice, and they then, after this significant change in their life, they then started sharing about how they'd been working with a psychologist for 20 years. And they thought that was normal. And they still hadn't moved past what they do. Now, to me, we as individuals can change anything at any particular moment when we make the decision to do so. So much of our lives is caught up in this judgment of what we should be, what we should do, in our own disempowerment of not actually taking the responsibility to make our own decisions. So when I define myself as what I was, I'm ultimately inviting a death into my own life. I'm living in a particular place where I'm here to live, but I'm reminding myself and attaching myself to something that has already been, something that's died, something that's gone, something that no longer lives, that I keep breathing life into. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy to just suddenly let go of that, but what I focus upon is definitive practices so you can become present in this moment. You're not defined by who you were or what you're going to become. You're defined by your experience and how you relate to yourself at this moment. So the very nature that things are bad and good is just a condition of disintegration. How I choose to use alcohol, how I choose to use medicine, how I choose to use a gun, that is all completely up to me and in my own form of expression. But to see something that has control over me because it's good or bad, I mean, this might challenge some people, and this is the narrative that's been brought recently in a whole range of that the climate's going to kill us. If it's not the climate, it's 5G. And if it's not 5G, it's the vaccines. If it's not that, it's going to be tyranny, and then all of these other things that exist. I would stand very clearly here and say to people that in a short period of time, that they can get themselves into a particular space that eventually becomes autonomic, where things like 5G, things like cancer, things like any condition, even taking the vaccine and realizing it's something I don't want and it's having an impact upon me, those things can be reversed in any particular moment if we choose. The biggest challenge is letting go of the expert opinion that you now put yourself in a position to be your authority and determine that not to be true. And to me, that's what this is all about. That it's not about the fear of what's coming. It's about realizing, well, wait a second, if that's coming, what is it within me that I can do to overcome that? Because throughout history, people have survived, people have thrived, and people have grown. Nothing has stopped us because we're still here. So if we want to start to get caught up, get stuck in these things are coming together and we want to fight against them, we are only breathing life into the very thing that we don't want. 5G is a frequency. Every frequency exists. Nothing can be created or destroyed. It's your relationship with it, and to recognize that significance that comes in the, yeah, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this person said? But what about all of these things? That becomes a very disintegration of our own self, where we're not prepared to take a responsibility and first of all say, you know what? Well, that's possible, but I don't know how to do that. And it's in that moment that we become liberated, because I go, well, I don't know, then I can accept new information. But if I want to tell you, no, that's not possible. No, you can't do that. No, that won't work. I've seen this. It's happened to me and these people. Well, there you'll be. You'll be stuck in that moment. And that's what I'm saying. It's the choice that we have at any particular point in time when we understand how to do one thing. It's just navigate the unknown, navigate the darkness. Everything else surrenders to it. And in the same way, everything will surrender to your attention. Try and give real attention to someone who you hate, and I mean real attention to actually understand them. They will become someone you love. That hate cannot sustain in that. That hate is just ignorance. It's where I'm not prepared to give attention to understand, but where instead I want to project upon them what I think that they are. Keeps me safe so I don't have to consider what I would like to do to change. And that's but there's some, I suppose, some deeper concepts in there, but the irony is the simplicity that I've learned is in our being and our body. And there's one thing that I would say is practices like meditation and what meditation has become bastardized to be these days. And it is nothing much more than a drug at times, because it allows people to have a temporary high, something they can escape to. The thing is, if we have to keep prescribing into something, it doesn't work. There's an opposition there that doesn't allow it to be a part of ourselves and integrate. If we're practicing meditation for year after year after year after year, and we stop that and we feel some sort of level of reduction in our own experience and relationship to ourselves, there's something that we're holding and maintaining that opposes that very thing. It's not bad. It's just to understand there's something within us that's not receiving it, because we're perceiving that to be a good thing. That's what's sustaining me. That's what I'm relying upon and dependent upon. When we go into state, meditation is a very advanced practice that brings into a state of integration our brain, which then allows us to access greater levels of capacity and our 7 senses, and now ultimately our noble senses of awareness, where we can start to see everything as it is, rather than separated parts of what we hear and what we see, and those opposing each other. I'm not quite sure what that means and what to trust and what to believe. But meditation, for example, and this can apply to many other practices, is it ultimately takes us into a particular state. If we have to keep practicing it, we're not integrating it, and therefore we're opposing it. Now, when we intend to sit there and be silent, what happens is we find ourselves not being silent, and we're trying to focus on not being silent by being silent. There's one thing that occurs that is autonomic within each of us. And this is the discovery that everything exists to support us and everything is perfect. It's just a matter of aligning it rather than interrupting and trying to say, this is the way I want it to be. When you get a pen and paper and you start writing, you can't think of anything else. You automatically in that particular place will find a deep connection and presence with yourself. And for some, that's a difficult and inconvenient space to be. But it's not possible to write and think of something else, to be separated. We come into a moment of our own space. And it's in that particular place that we're undeniable. To explore that, to understand that, it might not be as cool as allowing in, structures of sacred geometry and pictures and images that are drawing through us, that are elevating us and feeling uplifted in that moment. If we can't maintain it, we don't understand it. And that's, for many of us, we're on that treadmill where we're having these highs. Now I get down to the low and I'm like, I've got to do that again. And we're very much subjected to and triggered by the things in our life that bring us pain that we end up trying to fix. So what I'm, I suppose, presenting is that everything is already there. We don't need new practices, new understandings. It's about understanding how we integrate. Once we're integrated, we can then choose. Once we choose, then we realize the capacity and the significance we have. And our challenge is about being able to maintain that, to be able to accept that, because it's when we live by habits that support us that we find ourselves living effortlessly and elevating ourselves. And as you look at people of great success that seem to do things that other people are grinding away trying to get some element of success, they seem to do it willingly. It seems to just happen as a part of the process of their own day. They're not fighting, forcing, it just, they're aware to it because they've created habits that support themselves. They've created habits that align with them. They've become present to what it is that works for them. And most often, people are choosing to do things in their life that inspire them when they have success. There's not many people that I would suggest that exist in this world that are doing something that are not inspired by, but have success or fulfillment in their life. I was asked the other day, who do I have the most amount of sadness for? And I said, I believe that people that are doing work that they don't love. That is the tragedy that exists in this particular world at the moment, that people that are going to a job, going to a space, spending their day, spending their life, not doing something that absolutely inspires them. And this to me is the greatest reset of, you know, these mandates or things that are being forced upon people, is to actually now break free, to go, what do I want to do? What do I love? What could I do? What would it be that I would choose to spend my time away from the people that I most love, to engage and to give myself permission to do so? What would my life become in a very short space of time if I was to do that?
Oh man, I love that. It's like the greatest tragedy of our time is that, and it's true for most people, doing work that they don't love and not inspired to do. And that's really fascinating to explore that concept. And I'm curious as how many people actually are, you know, on their life purpose, doing what they love, just waking up every day and creating from that space of like, wow, this is what I feel inspired to do today. I really think that's, you know, a really valid point in the reset that's coming for most people, particularly with the mandates that are happening. And I just wanted to share that video that you shared this morning around good intentions. Highly recommend, if any of you are watching right now and you love what Jason is sharing, just jump onto the Quantum Journey group on Facebook. I've left it in the comment section there, and he shared a great video in that space on good intentions and how we all have good intentions, but it's our ability to act on those. And most of us haven't kind of equipped ourselves with the ability to navigate how we've had this deep sense of avoidance of ourselves. And even like you said a moment ago in the meditation practice of getting caught up in the mind and not really fully being present with what is and where we're at. I'm curious to hear you elaborate on the piece of how to, instead of avoiding ourselves, how to really come back into awareness of ourselves in those habits every day, particularly being conscious of the words that we choose to use and speak. And I'm really curious to hear if you feel, particularly with the English language, as it's becoming, you know, the language of the planet nearly, how that has potentially been created by design to limit us or to enable us to expand our perceptions of our awareness of who we are, and if that plays a role in that piece of avoiding ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's all there. It's right in front of us, I'd say by design, but by divine design as well, not by mistake. Is, you know, just consider we all go through a week and we get to the weekend. Now, you know, just consider a week. We do something to be weak, and then we get to the weekend, which is to be weakened. And what do we do on a weekend? We're like, oh, I just got to escape from what I'm doing, because we are weakened and we're depleted because we're not. I mean, there's thousands of examples, and you can get creative if you like, and as far as how those words can work. It's important that, I suppose, when we start to become more aware, those things start to pop. But for me, it's like the germ theory and the terrain theory when it comes to health and wellness. It's creating an environment within which only sustains your growth, where it's not a force. Because saying I use a lot of the time is anything, without power requires force. Anything without power requires force, and anything with power requires no force. And the thing is, it doesn't need to be proved. It doesn't need to be pushed. So, you know, in our life, we have an opportunity, and that's probably the most embarrassing part, is that we have such a significance in our own life and so many opportunities that at times we become confounded by confusion of the choices that we have. But just consider what confusion is. Confusion is an embarrassment of riches. Confusion is where I have so many opportunities, so many possibilities in front of me. I just don't know which one to choose. So is it the confusion, or is it the capacity that I haven't developed a relationship with myself where I trust myself to take action, to make decisions, to move forward? Because ultimately, in every particular part of our life, when we are inspired, when we decide we don't want to be experiencing what we're doing, we want to make more money, we want to have a greater love life, we want to have a more engaging life with our kids, we want to become more intelligent, whatever it may be, it's all in the process of moving forward. So I would, I suppose, look at, it's not easy at times for us to choose to identify what we want to do in our life and what it is that most inspires us. But if we're not doing something that, and I know this may be hard for some to hear, that is more important than anyone or anything else in this world, more important than our children, more important than our partner, more important than our family, we're missing the point. Because the reality is, when we're doing that in our own life, what we are doing is choosing to be in that particular space, and we're taking time away from it. The regrets that people have on their deathbed, which is consistent, is the time they didn't spend with their loved ones. And I think the big thing that's missed in that is the relationship with themselves. When we can climb the mountain of actually loving and appreciating ourselves, and I don't mean just in I'm a great person and get caught up in saying affirmations for a temporary point to convince ourselves that we're great. What I'm talking about is creating an environment. Now, in creating an environment, what we're actually doing is choosing what it is that we want in our life. And if we consider what's going on in the world at the moment, what's been taken away or what's been attempted, coerced, or a bit of a sleight of hand, is the idea that you don't have a choice. And for many of us, we have tyranny. We have overarching and overreaching people in our lives, not just governments, because that's what we have demanded, because we have chosen not to take that responsibility ourselves. Until we accept that, that won't change. So, for example, one of the most liberating things is to consider, that when I want to love myself, one of the things I'm going to become aware of, if I choose to love and embrace what I am, what I'm going to become very aware of is that I hate myself. And until I can accept that I hate myself and do so without judging or fighting against myself, I think that I'm doing something wrong. But to realize and allow that to move through me that, yeah, I do hate myself, and I have. But if I don't acknowledge that, I have to continue to keep forcing and pushing against it and suppressing that. But if I can accept in my own way, that's not a bad thing, but yeah, you know what? I do hate myself, and I have hated myself in this particular, and I'm at ease with that. I also love myself. I also have all those other experiences, and it moves through me. But when I keep fighting against those things that, no, I'm amazing. No, I don't hate myself. Or any of these particular negative traits that we do not embrace, we're going to continue to be suppressed. So I think it's really, really important, and it's such a critical time. I'm seeing so many groups that are starting up, but not many that are sustaining. But there's a beautiful thing happening on the Sunshine Coast where people are starting to actually consider what happens beyond this. to start to create new networks of food, to start to create new networks of communication, to start to step away from the dependencies of an old system. And sometimes it means getting our hands dirty. Sometimes it means moving away from the conveniences that we've had and getting back to creating. It is the most inspiring thing that anyone can do in their life is to create. The question is, what do I want to create? And that's where the confusion comes. But I suppose that's a lot of what we teach. And I suppose what I think is most important is creating, again, that environment where it becomes a non-negotiable in your own life that you do that. And the interesting thing is when you give yourself more time, you have more time. Suddenly you're not rushing everywhere. Suddenly it's not like, I've got this, I don't have time for all of those things. I mean, we hear that so often, but people only realize how much time they don't have when they want to give themselves time.
Yeah, I really love that piece, Jason, particularly, being real with what's happening right now and letting go of our codependency on these old systems where many people have been really calling in change for such a long time on so many fronts. And we've known how necessary and relevant it is for us to enact on that. And suddenly, like, here it is presented to us with this opportunity to just really embark on this whole new journey and step into find that courage within to be able to say, yeah, like, I'm ready to create a new world, create new systems, create more localized opportunity for us to connect and create and be in a space of inspiration of what I truly love to do in the world. And then also acknowledging, what are our fundamental needs? And so people looking at redesigning where they live, how they live, what they eat, where they source their food from, how their communities are structured in the relevance of the work that they choose to do on a daily basis. And with all of that, I really like the piece where you shared, practicing the art of gracefully letting go and just emphasizing the importance of that, particularly when so much is changing. And it seems to me that when, as a larger cultural collective, when we potentially haven't confronted or mastered the art of letting go of this life and actually facing the fact that there is certainty in this existence, and that is, we're all going to die at some point, right? We're all going to pass. We're all going to move on to another realm of existence. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective on this level of relating to, which you've kind of mentioned in this talk around navigating the dark side of life, but, having peace with the process of passing and death. So much of us are caught up in the grief and the sadness and the terribleness of life and death. And I'm curious what your perspective is and the importance of potentially reframing our cultural relationship to this process.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I think I've read about 3 books in my life, and one of them that I scoured through was about the Tibetan book of living and dying. And one of the things I took from that as I looked through it was all about how in Western culture, death is something that's hidden away, whereas in this particular case, Buddhism, it was something that people are preparing for through the entirety of their life. It's the death is we've become indoctrinated into this whole physical idea and a physical being. We possess things, we hold on to things. We determine our status by what we can see, what we can touch, what we can feel. We work into such a limitation where we've burdened our physical body. It's no reason why we die so young and why we're under such stress and we've got all these diseases. It's because we're putting this unexpected capacity of intelligence, awareness, and a whole range of other aspects onto our physical body. We define ourselves by our physical body, how we look, what we eat, how we dress, how we present ourselves. We've lost the capacity to tap into our noble senses of intuition and imagination. Now, what happens when we're in that physical state? We're in constant denial of not who we are, because that's what we end up focusing upon when we become very much physically driven. We are 2 things in my understanding. We are energetic and we are physical. The harmony and the integration of those things allows us to be present. the disintegration and separation of those things allows us to access the mind, which is other people's information from the past, the future, and even our own information from the past. So those things are a particular choice. Now, what I might, would you just mind, sorry, Shay, just to repeat the last part of the question of
Yeah, absolutely. My question, where I was going with it was, how do we shift, our cultural perspective to really integrate this into our lives in the way that we understand the certainty of that process, and actually making it more familiar for us, so that we can navigate, as you've explained, that shadow element of our existence, which, like you said, doesn't get talked about, doesn't really get that acknowledged until it comes. And for me, I feel that it can really help to liberate us in the living moment and being fully alive.
Yeah. To me, patience is key. Patience is a choice to determine a direction that I'm heading and to follow it through until I'm complete. Waiting is about making a decision, but at being determined by someone else to tell you when you're complete. So when we focus, if we look into our life, concepts like completion is when we get to a point where there's no longer any attention required. So in the most simple example is when we're walking, there's a level of attention, conscious or unconscious, that goes onto our foot as we hit the ground, and as it becomes solid and we take up that space and we complete that step, we're then capable to make the next one. If we don't complete that step and we start taking the next one, we'll fall over. Now, for most of us in our own life, we've got so many things that we started, so many things that we've said yes to, that we've never completed. And ultimately, they become the burden in our own life. The idea is just to get away from the fact that something is wrong, and to stop working with the result or the outcome or the consequence that we see, which is just the surface level. It's the reaction to what is going on internally, or the root cause of what's happened. Now, I'll say this again, and without oversimplifying it, I suppose, or without just repeating it, but there are certain laws that are immutable within our own life. No matter how much we want to change it, no matter how much someone wants to try and reinvent it, it's not going to change. The thing is, when we come to accept and understand it, then we can move beyond it, and we can start moving into our own prosperity to create. Until we do that, we'll keep fighting against things, we'll be in opposition. So if we don't, at a physical level, if we don't go to the bathroom each day and release the nutrients that we have taken in to sustain ourselves, we're going to find ourselves in a lot of pain. We'll find ourselves in a very quick pathway to our own death. We become toxic as we hold on to things that do not belong to us or no longer serve us. It's a really simple example. And the evidence of that is it creates a high level of moral hazard. But if we don't do it, there's going to be a great amount of pain. The thing is, our physical is such a small part of what we are. It's our energetic, which is so significant. Mainly because it's been ignored. Maybe because it's misunderstood. Maybe because people don't understand how to navigate it. And ideally, it's the most simple part of our own being. We take on things and we hold on to everything that we do not understand. And I want that to be made really clear, that we hold on to the things that we don't understand. The fight we have with our brother, our mother, and those broken relationships we have is all because we're holding on to something that we don't understand, what they said to me. And even if we take this further to an external relationship with a government or a community, is we're holding on to what they said, but we don't actually understand it. Now, it doesn't matter what the situation is, but when we actually choose to bring our attention to something in order to understand it, that thing dissolves in the moment. A broken relationship of 20, 30 years that could be dramatic and traumatic for two people that has created a lot of pain. When those two people choose to sit down and you get to understand it from the other person's perspective without judging them, in that moment, the amount of energy that's released when you realize, I get it. God, I've always thought this about you and why you did that. I now understand why you did it. There's a level of love that cannot be denied. It's automatic. It doesn't need to be forced. It's as if life comes back into that moment because there's now understanding and energy moves through it. We can't recreate that. We can't force it. We can't change it. It's the way that it works, and it always have and it always will. Stop trying to reinvent. So the thing is, in our own life, there's some very simple principles of things that there's stuff we know, and this has become one of the greatest indoctrinations of life and the physical state, is the stuff that we know, and this idea of knowing when we're talking about the indoctrination of words. Knowledge, the idea is to hold on to it. Knowing is a conversation. It's not an action. It's not an expression. At the very basis of our existence, another immutable law is that we are here to express ourselves. And ultimately, our fulfillment will be experienced by the degree to which we express ourselves authentically, in truth, to what it is that we are. So knowing causes us to continue to keep circulating ideas that we don't understand. Concepts, philosophies, theories, stories. Yeah, I know that. I get that. But yet there is no action. If we can look in our own life and we can start to realize with a level of love and appreciation for ourselves to go, well, hey, there's a whole lot I know about this, but I don't have any example of it or expression of it or freedom of it in my own life. When we have that level of accountability and ideally love, because for me to say to someone that I know at an inconvenient level that what they may be doing may be hindering or holding them back is very inconvenient. It's very challenging, but it requires a level of love and care for that individual to actually bring that conversation up. But more importantly, it's for us to be able to do that for ourselves, not in judgment, but in the recognition of, I can see what I'm doing. And when we can come to accept that of our own self, when we start to realize that I know things, but there is no action, is, okay, I know this. Give yourself the freedom to say, yeah, I know a lot about this. I know so much about it, but I don't understand it. Because if I understood it, I would be actioning it. I would be taking my own expression and I'd be inspired by creating movement through my life in order to bring it into a state of manifestation and creation. Manifestation isn't something random that happens. It's when you make a courageous choice to step into a place that only you can see. Knowing is about repeating a space of comfort that we can talk about the things that we don't understand together, and ultimately have no demonstration of expression, courage, because we're not inspired by what someone says. We find it interesting. What we're inspired by is when people do something different and we feel the courage in it, what they overcome. That's what enlivens and engages and activates us. But in order for us to do that ourselves, we've got to realize to have inspiration, to have love, to have fulfillment in our life, we've got to do things that are different. We're not inspired by doing the same thing. That's called boredom. And that is falling into a state of comfort. That is falling into a state of certainty with other people that are also comfortable staying in their own place. So knowledge, in the way it's been inflicted upon us, I mean, if you look at it, it's been presented to us to gain more knowledge, more information, take more information on. I would say stop it. Stop reading. Stop absorbing other people's opinions until you first understand yourself. This is the very degeneration of the soul, the ignorance of the soul, is the taking on of other people's information. Your soul does not need healing. Your soul does not need anything. Your soul is perfection in any particular way. It needs no healing. The only thing that needs healing is what we have taken on as a problem in our own life, that we have decided that the physical part is more prioritized than the energetic, because we're not prepared to say, I don't know how to do that. And that's, maybe going back to what you're saying with that video about good intentions, there's a lot of good intentions of people teaching things, showing things that worked for them. But ultimately, we need to have a level of discernment and accountability within our own self, and not blame people for what they're presenting to us, but to recognize in our own self the choices I made, what that got me, and then the realization I have more choices I can make and continue to keep moving forward, because I only become restricted and limited in my life by where I choose to stop, where I believe I can't move forward. So we need to, I suppose, look at in our own life is, do we have the capacity to receive discomfort, inconvenient conversations from the people that we love? And do we realize that when someone may be bringing that forward to us, that it's not something that they woke up and said, I can't wait to go and tell someone else how rude or arrogant they're being to me, or how degenerative they're being in a particular way. No one wants to do that, but to be able to receive that without needing to take it on, but to provide audience and to allow someone to speak their own authenticity in that particular way, that is extremely empowering. To go into the I don't know, maybe you're right, let me consider that. But that comes back to a particular point, and it'll always come back to a point, do I trust myself? I can have someone call me an arsehole, rude, brilliant, amazing, seduce me, or try to degenerate me. That'll be dependent upon how much I trust myself, not what they are doing or what they are saying, because that's their right and their choice. How I choose to receive it is up to me. But if we can flip all of that, I would say in a year's time, we can be living in a world where we don't need to be lobbying people that we want our freedom back from who never had it. You know, we're looking in a bin of something that we threw out that it never got put in the bin. We've still got it in our hand. And that's the irony of that. But, you know, the great thing that's happening in the world at the moment is people are coming together, but it's coming to a point for what reason, for what purpose? What happens beyond this? Are we hoping for some of us, as you hear, that we're going to hang these guys and we're going to get revenge, we're going to win? Are we doing in such a way that we want to have a new people and nice people coming in to represent us? Why are we focusing upon other people? This is an awakening within our own self that is inevitable and has been there for thousands of years. It hasn't just happened in the last couple.
Beautifully said, Jason. I love your perspective on reclaiming our sovereign selves by just taking that responsibility and accountability for our own actions and our own navigation towards deeper senses of freedom by really confronting the darkness and befriending that relationship with ourselves. So, mate, I really want to just thank you and honor you for your time today. And I'm actually quite excited, to go deeper down these rabbit holes with you, because I can see, there's so many spiraling conversations in just this one that I feel you have this gift of articulating, the experience of navigating life through the human lens. And I can see that it just offers so much to the world right now, so much value in. And for anyone who's watching right now, if you found value in this, please just like it, leave us a comment, even share this video. Jason, you can find his Facebook group. I highly recommend to join it. I've been a part of the group for some months now, and it's the Quantum Journey, or the Facebook page is the Quantum Movement with Jason Reynolds, mate. I just want to thank you again for your time today, and look forward to more conversations like this, because I really see the value in, opening up these conscious conversations for allowing people to find their own truth. And that's been a big mission of yours. I can see that you've got a really good heart, and that you're service orientated to just give to people so that they can, walk their own path and find their own way in life and be their own hero within. So I just want to thank you for that. And if you got any last closing statements, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just thank you, Shay. Thank you. As I said at the start, it doesn't happen without you being at the facilitating, holding the space for this. And it's this is excuse me, it's not a one shot. It's not for all of us to look for some solution. It's about enjoying the journey and moving forward. And I do want to say something, but I want to just, if it's okay with you, there's something that we recently worked with who I think is an amazing man, Jason Miles, who's a Senate candidate for Queensland, who's not your cardboard cutout politician, who's doing some amazing things. But he was telling us about the thousands of emails and messages he was getting of people suffering, considering the end of their life, and not knowing what to do with everything that's going on. And to me, in the realization, people actually expressing that and bringing that forward shows how much more beneath the surface there is. So something that we haven't done before, and we offered him, and we put together a particular 4-week experience to share some of our work that's usually of a high ticket price. And we're doing that in a pay what you want or free for people, whatever the situation may be, but felt compelled to share something that we know works in people's lives. And like what you're saying before, as a practice or a process, something I can probably share in a 2-minute, like, hey, go and apply this. There's a space that needs to be held. So we were just doing that to that particular group, but it's an invitation, something we're starting next week, something we've never done before, but to share a definitive way that allows people to navigate through that darkness in a real way. But I will say to people that, be aware. It works. And the problem is with that, it'll be confronting, and it'll mean change, and it'll mean leaving all of that behind. But I wanted just to make sure that was there, because we don't do things for free. I don't believe in doing things for free, because I believe that it's about people making a choice and finding their way into it. But at this particular point, as I said, we're doing a pay what you want. But beyond that, I would say, whether it's looking at your brilliance, whether it's just considering that question, and I just want to iterate on that. Don't do it looking for some solution or some way out of life or some sort of blinding moment from the sky that's going to change your life. It's the habit and the continuation of it. And as I said, with that particular practice and whatever that may be, when you first start doing something like that, first might be exciting, but the coming days after that are going to be very challenging, because you'll realize how difficult or challenging or how uncomfortable you may feel just doing it. That's the moments to move through. That's you determining how to move through those uncertainties, the unknown, and the darkness that may be there, the unknown. So be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to, whatever that may be each and every day, just try and sit with yourself for no reason without trying to fix anything. Just to actually consider who you are, and just to recant in the day for 4 or 5 minutes what it is that you've allowed yourself to experience, and even just ask yourself, what is it that I would love to experience in my life? Not from a point of view of manifest, but just to allow these questions in, receive the information, but start to create a different environment in your own life. And what would it take for you to move away from opposing or blaming people that you believe are creating restriction in your life? If you turned off the TV, turned off any level of information for a week, the attention that would bring upon you to actually start to move forward in a very profound way. Experience it, try it. Just allow yourself for 1 week to stop blaming the pharmaceuticals, stop blaming the government, stop blaming the police, stop blaming the neighbor, stop blaming anyone that is opposing, those that are vaxxed, those that are unvaxxed. Stop blaming anyone, but actually allow yourself to be absent to it, to realize in the intention of doing that how indoctrinated and how addictive it has become. What would I create if I spent all of my time over the last 2 years that I have in this bell like Pavlov's dog, in a distraction to want to know more what's going on and the ongoing saga? What if I spent all of that time over the last year when we're prepared to fall over, trip over through that process to discover and create what I want to create in a very audacious and bold way? Where would I be right now? And it's not to judge what I've done, but it's to consider, well, what could I do? And then come together with people doing the same, because you might just be the leader that everyone else is looking for, not the follower.
Yeah, that's profound, Jason. I just wanted to ask if you could just provide that link for the opportunity that you're offering for next week, people to come together. I feel like that's a great chance for those who are interested, and really love what Jason's sharing here. I feel that it can be tremendously powerful for us each to go on that journey within, be our own leader, be our own hero. So if you have that available, I'd love to drop that in the comments for everyone watching now. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to thank you guys for watching and tuning in right now. Amazing synchronicity coming up right now. We've got 11:11, so it's happening, and the signs are right in front of us. So I appreciate that, Jason. But again, for those of you who are listening and tuning in, I've left it in the comment sections, but a quantum journey. It's a hugely, rapidly growing movement, thanks to Laura and Jason, just enabling people to step into their own power, feel that brilliance, as Jason said. And yeah, be curious if you had that link, and we could share that with people to join.
Sorry, mate. I was trying to put it in the, just a bit of a rookie move, trying to put it in the comments, but I realized that's what people are doing rather than. But that's the, Laura might be able to provide you with a better one. Yeah, that's there. That it's called the Attention Project, and it's The Attention Project is a centralization of a couple of things, where the main intentions of it as a not-for-profit that's starting up is, well, it's been going for some time, but is to end teenage suicide. And I mean, that's not a difficult thing, but it's a tragic thing that continues to exist and, gets defined by statistics. But the other one, which is most important in creating change, is reintroducing generational wisdom. Generational wisdom and the taking away of generational wisdom that has coincided with the schooling system. It doesn't mean that we have to take kids out of school or oppose any of that particular part as well, but this is about instigating within parents and their children the very profound capacity of generational wisdom and the relationship between us and our children, which allows us to elevate our own generations of information rather than being indoctrinated and fed what we're told. It's these two things within the Attention Project is something that we're moving into next year and inviting people into. But these things, and I suppose a large part of what we're about, is leaving a legacy. It's not about some temporary changes at the moment. I was just saying to someone the other day of how excited and how amazing it is to be alive at the moment, and how could you orchestrate something as significant as this when I understand human behavior and the challenges and the toxicity it's bringing up in people. It is amazing and brilliant, because people go and spend thousands of dollars, as I said before, 20 years to release all this toxicity, but it's been brought about by the very thing people are fighting against their mentors, by the people that are actually awakening them, rather than looking at these things outside of us, rather than saying, hey, wait, that was a defining moment in my life. These people trying to enforce upon me to awaken me. There's no better time than now to actually go, wait a second, what have I been doing? This is the most beautiful, significant time in our life, but whilst we're in it, it's sometimes difficult to see through that. It's like the trauma, that we'd only see it upon reflection to go, wow, that was amazing, an experience in my life as I now understand it. But yeah.
Bless, Jason. Thanks for your time, brother. Look forward to more of these conversations very soon in the future, and wish you all the best for next week. And those who feel called, just jump on that link. Laura's dropped it in the comment section there. Come and join us. It's going to be a great experience. So chat to you soon, Jason.
Thanks, heaps. Thanks, Shay. You're a legend.